Hey, and welcome to Neverwinter with Aragon. So today I'd like to go over my Paladin tanking build for Module 22, primarily for the trial Crown of Celtigon that will be released within this new module. So let's go over our powers, and initially I'll go over my single target setup, so what powers you want to use when against a boss, and after that I'll go over my AoE setup. There'll be like timestamps in the description video, and you'll also be able to see them then on the video progress bar. So initially with our at-wills, we're running Oath Strike, and you pretty much run this all the time. This will be your at-will that you'll keep swinging whenever you're not casting your other powers. It has increased threat, meaning it'll make it that little bit easier to maintain the aggro so that your enemies are hitting you instead of your allies. Then I use Radiant Slam just to give that gap closer, so you can close the gap much quicker between your target rather than just walking back up to it. It will help when you're switching between bosses. Then for our encounter powers, our primary one we will use is Smite. It'll give you that ability when you use this class feature, Divine Challenger, to place you on top of the threat list of the target. So basically whenever you, let's say, lose aggro, or you want to make sure you're not going to lose it for a few more seconds, then you can hit that smite and it'll put you 10% above the maximum damage that somebody has dealt to the target, just meaning that you will be put on top of the threat list, meaning they will target you until somebody else has done more damage than the target thinks you have done. I've made more in-depth videos in the past, and I'll leave a link in the description to my most recent threat overview so you can understand that more easily. Secondary encounter power, I use Sacred Weapon mainly just to give me that restoration in my stamina and also increasing my threat when you use it with this Sacred Shield feat. And basically it just has that added effect. It's just very neat. The cooldown is a bit more lengthy than our other encounter powers. An alternative to it, you could switch to Absolution for that little bit more survivability for 8 seconds. And as my third encounter power, I generally run Binding Oath. Again, it will help you with that stamina regeneration. Very nice to just make sure you have that added survivability. And that is what I run in the single target boss fights, again using Absolution if you really need the extra survivability. Then for our daily powers, I'm usually running Shield of Faith, not for my own survivability, but for my party's survivability. We run this in conjunction with Sheltering Light to make sure that my party members will get healed for 50% of the value that I get healed for. And this is only for the 10 seconds though, when you have this daily power active. Otherwise, at the beginning of a boss fight, I use Divine Judgment to make sure that I have the aggro again. You need to output as much damage as the DPS are dealing to make sure you're on top of the threat list. Now that doesn't mean you have to deal the same numbers, you just have to make sure the boss thinks you deal that much damage. We have features that give us added threat benefits. For example, here just as a tank we have increased that threat generation, meaning if something says here 2200 magnitude, you could multiply that by 4 just by our Oath of Protection. And you can look at DPSs and they have no way of having a daily power that deals that much damage in terms of magnitude. But we don't have the offensive stats to back that up. So again, it's not as much, but it will help at the beginning of the fight to not lose it. Alternatively, again, if you really need the extra layer of protection, there is Divine Protector that you could be using. It'll give you that 30% awareness, and if you use it with this feat, Shield of the Gods, you can see you'll reduce the damage by 25% that you take, and you'll also no longer have to be tethered to a target to gain the awareness, so it's very good there. With our mechanics, again, we just have our shift power, which is our block, where you'll block incoming damage when somebody hits you. You can see all of those hits will become blue markers there. That means you've successfully blocked. If I don't block, you can see that will all be just red hits. And this shield is 40% of our total maximum hit points. So that's 40% of nearly 1.2 million. So we have a pretty massive shield. Then our tab power is going to make us look like so. It will drain divinity over time. You can see that here on the right bar. However, it will allow us to automatically block half of the damage, so you will see both red markers and shield markers through this. it means you can tank things just by doing that, and we can also hit our targets while having this active. It can be a very nice feature. However, what you mainly want to do is use it with the shift power, with the block, because we'll get then Divine Palisade, which will increase our shield value up to 60%. So again, we need to make sure we have the divinity available to be able to use our tab. When we use our tab and then we go and get attacked, we can block as well, and we look like this. We can't move around or do anything else, but our shield gets increased to 60%, so we'll be able to block a lot more damage. So you use this when you're going to take a big hit. You'll also decrease the damage you take by 10% and also heal yourself and allies who are behind you. You can see when you have this active, it creates kind of a cone, and you can see that behind you, and it gives you the buff up here of Divine Palisade. And then with a feat, we can also increase the effectiveness of the shield. The shield here is a 60%, and it will also reduce the cost of your divinity drain over time. So you absolutely want to be using that with that Divine Palisade. Then for our class features, I generally like to run with one of these auras. Usually in a trial especially, you'll have like 2 paladins at least. So somebody runs with the deflect chance aura and another person runs with the critical rate aura. They just give 2%, but whenever you're in your like divine champion and your palisade, that will get buffed up to 4%. So it's pretty neat there. You can see our deflects at 80%, and when we use our divine champion, you can see the aura down there, and you can see that our deflect is now up another 2%, so that gets increased to 4%. So that's pretty neat. And as my secondary class feature, we are of course using Divine Challenger. So we generally use Aura of Protection or Aura of Wrath plus our Divine Challenger. Usually we don't need the added divinity regen from Composure, and you'll barely feel it even if you have it slotted. As for our feats, we've already gone over a little bit, and we use our Sacred Shield there just to increase the effectiveness of our Sacred Weapon. We use our Baneful Strikes or our Burning Vengeance, it doesn't matter in single target. And we use our Divine Pursuit basically to allow us to regen that divinity over time a bit faster. And then I run with Sheltering Light just to give us the added effect of Shield of Faith, so we can heal our allies while we have this up. When the healer heals you, your allies will also get healed. It's a very good benefit, especially in the trial, whenever you take the damage over time from those supports. And Shield of the Gods if you really need the added effect of survivability. If you're running some new content and you think you might die, then just run with Shield of the Gods for a bit of a safer. I generally have like 2 loadouts. One will have Shield of the Gods and the other one has Sheltering Light. And then finally we're using Unyielding Champion just to give the block up to 60% there on our Divine Palisade. Also decrease the drain on our divinity when we have it active, this tab power Divine Champion. And otherwise it's just a whole lot better than this Intimidating Presence, which supposedly increases your threat, but it's absolute garbage. And so for my AoE setup, I run with like this, and the only real change is my encounter powers and let's say one of my feats. I run with Templar's Wrath to give that added effect of threat, so whenever you have multiple targets you can go and cast it. Once you've done so, you pretty much will never lose the aggro of those enemies again, because AoE enemies, like enemies where you have lots of them, generally don't have lots of hit points. So once you've hit them for a massive hit, there's no way your allies can actually deal that much damage before they're dead anyway. And then next up I use Vow of Enmity. It's basically like a ranged power that will put you on top of the threat list. Generally use it as emergency power, let's say when your allies are getting swarmed by some enemies, but it will only really work when your allies have actually done some damage to the enemies, as it will place you on top of the threat list, which will only be 10% above the damage already done to the enemies. And finally we use Burning Light just for that added effect of stun, that 3-second stun duration, and we combine it with the feat down here to basically put its magnitude just to 800. Then we use for our daily powers, we can use our Divine Protector, and you can see exactly how it works here. We're using it with the Shield of the Gods. Now I only use this mainly for boss, and I really don't need to use it anymore, because there was a period where you would have so many quicklings that would spawn and you would need that extra layer of protection, and then we would have our Shield of the Gods combined with Divine Protector for survivability. Alternatively, again, you could use the combo of Shield of Faith plus Sheltering Light to heal your allies, and then just Divine Judgment to kill off that pesky big guy who's lots of hit points, or just to get his attention at the very least. The AoE daily power I just find is way too long a cast time. You generally get knocked over by some enemies before you could even get this cast off most of the time. Otherwise, for class features, we're running Composure and like Aura of Vengeance. Whenever your enemies will deal damage to you or nearby party members, they take damage. This can help to just give you the aggro of those enemies, because through this you're hitting them, which means you're dealing damage to them, which means they're more likely to aggro on you then. And otherwise with our feats, they're basically the same, except we have Burning Vengeance and Shield of the Gods, because you may as well have a loadout with Shield of the Gods. So back to my trial build, what kind of statistics do I run with on here? Now you will notice my offense stats are not great, and that is because we really don't need it, especially as a Paladin tank, because we have our smite ability, which we can spam quite often, allowing us to be put immediately on top of the threat list. If we time this right and we place it out so that we, let's say, use one every 5 seconds or so, or during artifact calls a few times, then we can make sure we never lose that aggro. So offense stats are just out of the question. There's no need to use them. And so with my buff food and all of my buffs, I'm running with stats that look like this. Now I also have in my enhancement this fortified nature, which will basically give you stacks of defense, awareness and deflect. And we can see that when we go and get hit a bunch of times, let's say by these enemies, we can just stand here, we can see our stats going up. Unfortunately, it doesn't seem to give you defense, it only gives you awareness and deflect. But right now there's only fortified nature or flash freeze, and fortified nature is just that bit better. Healers or some other guys can run flash freeze for the debuff. There's no point in loads of people using it. So this will basically give you those temporary stats that will stack up, and in the new trial it's very helpful. Unfortunately, it does expire, heals you for a little bit, and then those stacks can go back up, and it allows me to get to deflect of 90%, albeit not consistently. But in the trial you take a lot of damage over time, so you're getting hit constantly, so this is no problem to stack up. Sure, it's fluctuating statistics, but right now we have more than enough defense stats to be able to survive through that trial. And I generally like to run with a feral raptor if I can as one of my companions, which gives me another big boost in my awareness. And also when we're in a full party, we'll gain the forest guardian stacks of awareness as well. So what you want to prioritize as a tank for your defensive stats is firstly defense, then awareness, and then as a paladin tank you want to go with your deflect and deflect severity. It depends though. If you're running Tower of the Mad Mage, you might want, rather than relying on, let's say, a chance to deflect, you would then run with more critical avoidance and awareness and defense to make sure you can survive, let's say, those big annihilation balls. And otherwise, lastly, the very last priority is maximum hit points. I generally don't stack it at all. You just try your best to basically cap out these ratings instead. So next up we go to my gear, and you can see what I'm running here is pretty much the best you could get there for a tank. Now arguably there are a few pieces I could switch out. For example, I could use a breastplate that would give me that 3% damage reduction, but I believe this awareness stacks is just a lot better. You can see 1500 awareness for each player in your party, so I'm missing 6000 rating of my awareness. And with the Turban of Shifting Sands, whenever you cast a daily power, you'll basically pull all enemies towards you. That's really good in AoE, and then even in single target it'll give you that extra deflect severity and also reduce your enemy's accuracy. Otherwise, with the Midnight Arms, you can see it gives us control bonus, but whenever we are struck, you can see we'll gain 5% up to 5% damage resistance, so that's pretty neat. And for our boots, we're using the Wisps of the Shadow Demon. Whenever we're critically struck, either we're critically healed or we're critically hit by the enemies. Enemies will always have 50% critical chance, so this is great to always proc off and get that defense and also 20% more max HP, so that's great. And otherwise for the rest of the gear, we're running this Queen Silver Crowned Ring. This gives us awareness stacks. Now ideally I would have a different ring, which would be this Living Silver Fern, or instead of that you could run with, let's say, a Tanner's Hardened Leather ring. But I found in the new trial we can generally space out and time smite enough that it's not going to be an issue. It might be an issue in the very beginning of the fight, but if you can time your smites well enough, you're not going to lose the aggro anyway. And thus I'm running with this Queen Silver Crowned Ring to give me those stacks of awareness. Again, you get hit all the time in this trial, so there's no problem keeping those stacks up. And otherwise for my left ring, I'm running with the 5% deflect for 10 seconds and only works in combat. However, it's a 30-second cooldown, so it's really not a great ring, so I just run it for the critical avoidance. For my shirt and pants, I'm just running those ones from the Voss, which have the highest item level, and that's about it. Weapons, I'm running with the Stronghold weapons or the Mastered Bronzewood weapons. They basically give you that stacks of outgoing healing, outgoing damage, and reducing the incoming damage. And when you're in a full party, that all gets increased to 10% of each of those. That's pretty massive, and it's great for the support party where we all just run Masterwork weapons. As for my neck and waist set, I'm running there, you can see, with Dashing Decoy. It gives you that ability to gain awareness and also increase your threat generation by 10% and reducing damage you take by 5%. It's pretty good, and you can see you'll have to run with that neck piece, that waist piece, and also the artifact down here, the Refulgent Diamond Pin. So we move on to actually what artifacts am I using. You can see I'm still using the Storyteller Journals, and there's no real need to do so anymore. You can switch to the much higher item level artifacts. You can see when we look in our Echoes of Prophecy that we were able to obtain 2 artifacts now. In the first part, you could obtain one from this pack, the Neverwinter Standard, and also from the bottom part here, the Jewel of the North. And they can get up to 1200 item level, along with the new Demogorgon's Reach artifact. You can see 1200. So you could run those 3 1200 item level artifacts instead, and thus gain just a pure item level boost, unless you have the Storyteller Journals, which I like because they give me that extra damage whenever I critically hit, which just gives a bit more aggro. Gives me also some stacks of power and some max HP, but you actually just gain that max HP by having item level from the higher artifacts anyway. So we go to my enchantments, and we can see in our offense we're just running Garnet. It just gives me straight power. We can make use of all of it. And then on our defense we're just running Cobalt because deflect severity. It was the hardest stat to actually get nice and up there, and we can see we can get our deflect severity nice and high, 72.8k there. And we're just using all Cobalts. Utility, we're using a Garnet for the Forte, and for combat we're using Fortified Nature. Bonus, we have this recharge speed bonus to allow us to be able to cast our encounter powers a bit more often. And for overloads we're running Critical Avoidance, Deflect Chance with Unholy Protection, and we're using Resiliency of the Adepts just to increase all incoming damage by 5%. Back to the gear, we have modifications. We can see in just our armor here we have Critical Avoidance in pretty much everything. You can see there, and that gives us 880 of that ratings. And then in our main hand we're running with just Enhanced Oath Strike to give it that 10% extra damage to obtain that bit more aggro. And then the offhand we're running with Recharge Speed, and then we're also running with Deflect Severity. Then with our neck, waist and rings, we can see with the modifications we're just running with Awareness. We could actually switch this to Stamina Gain, because of just running with Queen Silver Crowned Ring we can get our awareness up by that good chunk, and then also with the Forest Guardians we get that up another 6k, so we could be overcapped in awareness rating right now. So when you make your Paladin, what race should you be choosing? You can see I am running with an Asimov, and the main reason is because I like to use it as a healer, and it also gives a buff to the rest of the party. You can see 2% maximum hit points, and otherwise it gives that bonus to power, outgoing healing, incoming healing, defense, and max HP to yourself. There are definitely other options out there, and you can see on screen here my tier list of what races you should choose as a tanking class. As for our ability scores, you can see I'm just running with pure Constitution and Charisma. And the main reason is Con gives max HP and action points, and Charisma gives Forte and recharge speed. All good things. Let's move on to our companions, and we can see as a summoned companion I'm using the Cat. It's an augment companion. However, if you're running a trial, you may very well want to run with a different companion. A companion that can buff your party. Like Bruner will give a 3% damage resistance buff to all allies. You can also run with Drids to give a 3% damage bonus to all your allies. You could also run with the Spine Devil and so on. Now the benefit of running with the cat, and I would recommend running with it if you are a new tank and you need the extra survivability to make sure you are surviving. If you're a dead tank, you're not going to be doing anything. It gives deflect, awareness, and deflect severity. This is a very good bonus again for deflect severity. We can see with our companion enhancement, that's 7,500 rating. That's a massive boost of 22,500 ratings just from our companion. That gives us a pretty nice spread of stats right there. As for our companion equipment, we're just running with 2 deflection ones and also a defense one there. Ideally, I would have like some critical avoidance or deflect severity, but we can't really obtain those right now, and I haven't had any luck with regards to the Sharandar ones. I could switch to older versions you can see from, let's say, Master Expeditions. I actually don't have them right here right now. As for my companion enhancements, we're running with Redemption. It's a very good heal over time, and I highly recommend using it. Alternatively, you could buff up your stats and make them look a bit better by running something that would, let's say, increase your deflect by 7.5%, or increase your critical avoidance, or even go with armor break. DPS will love you for that, decreasing the enemy's defense. Ideally, somebody would run that in a trial. Then we're running with like the Golden Deep Crow and the mic on it. However, what I do when I can run this with a party with like the raptors, you can run with the feral raptor in one, and you could run with the tamed raptor in the other. The tamed raptor will basically give that benefit of extra power for your allies. You can see that here, up to 18% of it. It's massive boost. And then the same with an 18% awareness boost for the tanks, and just then giving survivability to healers and tanks is massive, along with 1 DPS then in the party would also run the 2 raptors. That's ideally what you would go with. Alternatively, you can see I'm running with the Golden Deep Crow, awareness boost to Myconid, critical avoidance and awareness, and otherwise I'm running Bruner and Regis. Regis is like a unique companion with regards to giving deflect severity. That's 4.7%. You'll actually gain an extra 3.75% defensive stats by running Bruner along with Regis, because they have that Companion of the Hall bonus. And then we're running with the Wattler to give us that deflect. Then we move to our mounts, and we can see in our current tab, we're just running with any mount here in our combat power to basically buff up our party's damage. We have like the Pegasus, or we could be running with the Eclipse Lion armament, or we could be running with the King of Spines. Then we're running with an Untouchable, just gives that deflect rating. You can run something else that you need that gives your defensive stats. And in our stable, we're running with this setup here. With our insignia bonuses, we're running 2 Gladiator's Guile, basically allow you to move a bit faster, and also just give you that stamina regeneration whenever your stamina is below 25%. Then with our other insignia bonuses, we're running a Barbarian's Revelry to give you that little bit more heal over time, same with Survivor's Blessing and Oppressive Reprieve. As for the insignias themselves, you can see we're mainly running with Courage, and we can see more Courage and more Courage and more Courage, and otherwise Fortitude with those illuminated insignias, because we can't actually run a Courage. And Courage, you can see, gives defense, a critical avoidance, and our Fortitude gives defense and max HP. Now I'm trying to avoid stacking max HP, and the main reason is one of the mechanics within the trial basically will deal damage based on how many hit points you have. As for the collars, you can see these don't really matter, just giving the item level and combined rating. You can see the sturdy one, it'll just take the encounter power one, because that's the majority of where our damage will come from. And we can see run with a supportive one with stamina gain, just incoming healing one as well, and then like action points or recharge speed is good as well. Keep in mind again, you can only run 1 color of each type. Now we move to our boons, and with our campaigns, we're just running with this setup. You want to take all of these defensive stats. You can see up here with even deflect severity over here, and then all of the hit points ones, and then you ideally for this trial want damage resistance against undead. You You can hear that will give you 5%. You also want marathon runner for the move speed, control resistance here as well. And then for tier 5, you want the forte, and you also want recharge speed. And for the master boon, you want focus retaliation. It'll basically give you the control resistance, it'll give you deflect, and also deflect severity per rank. That's 6% deflect severity from here and 6% deflect. Stronghold boons, you want just any offense, you want like defense, at least for my build I need that, and for utility you want revive sickness for any content you might die within. So let's go to what consumables am I using to, let's say, buff out these stats a little bit more. Well, you can see it in my belt section here. I'm running with an empowered chain of scales. It basically reliably gives you that 3% awareness. I'm running with the Neverwinter Hawk to give him that extra damage, and I'm running with a stone of health. As for the food, you can see I'm running this for food here. Caprice for the extra deflect and max HP, Full Hammer's Favor Elixir for extra deflect and deflect severity, and the crafted potion of deflect for the deflect rating. And just I'm using some, you could use guild food instead of this. This is the food you would buy within Shult, just from the vendor for some cheap astral diamonds. And otherwise, that's my build. Now you can go and feel free to leave any comments below, and I'll try to get back to you with regards to any questions of my build. I'm sure there are a few things here or there that I could optimize even further, but this is a build that works for me. If you really want to go budget as a tank, you can absolutely do so, and literally take anything that just gives you more survivability. Anything that gives you like defensive stats and defensive percentages is what you want to be going for. When I say defensive, I mean all of these 5 here. And if you just make sure you're prioritizing maxing out the amount of defensive stats, you're generally going to be perfectly fine. Ideally, of course, you want a gear setup like me with a bunch of these actual bonuses that will actually contribute to your survivability. So overall, hopefully this has been somewhat helpful and insightful to you Paladin tanks out there. The trial shouldn't be that hard to tank at all. And really, it's mainly about knowing what mechanics are going to happen next, making sure you can position yourselves right, and also just not losing aggro by timing your smites well enough. So again, if it presented this well, consider leaving the video a like, and if you're new around here, consider subscribing. We'll see you guys around. Goodbye for now.